And welcome back to Primility Primer, our morning reminder of the power of balancing pride and humility as we go about our daily lives. This is episode number 32. I am your host, Jared Morris, and this is a Wednesday. And so we are going to go back to Wisdom Wednesday, where we take a quote, a thought from a great historical figure, a great thinker, and break it down and discuss how it applies to our discussions here at Primility. And today's quote comes from the noted writer, statesman, botanist. This guy did it all, a German, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. I hope I got that pronunciation right. But here's the quote. The quote is, "It is a great error to take oneself for more than one is, or for less than one is worth." And actually, when I first saw this quote, it was on Twitter, and it was posted as a great failing to see yourself as more than you are and to value yourself at less than your true worth. Now, when I did a little bit of digging, which is always important for any quote that you see on social media and really like, to actually go dig and make sure that it's an accurate quote really said by the person who it is purported to have been said by. I couldn't find that exact interpretation or translation. So this is the one that I could find. Again, it is a great error to take oneself for more than one is or for less than one is worth. And I hope that if you've been listening to these episodes of Primility Primer or watching these episodes or reading the posts on Primility, that it becomes really clear why this is such a clear example of primility and really a foundational principle of everything that we talk about here, right? So it is a great error, A, to take oneself for more than one is, and then B, for less than one is worth. And with primility, this is what we are always trying to do, is get to the balance between those two. So we never want our pride in ourselves, in our own accomplishments, and our own abilities to morph into conceit. Because at this point now, we're thinking too highly of ourselves. We're thinking that we can do more than we can. We're thinking we can go it alone when we might need help, that we have all the information we need when we need to learn, right? This is when that pride runs rampant and becomes conceit and becomes the type of excess pride that is referred to as sin and that will really get us in trouble. So it is clear why that is a great error, right? To think of ourselves as more than we are. But the flip side of that is also true. It is not good for humility to turn into meekness, for us to think that we are capable of far less than we are, because this will result in us not speaking up, not acting, sitting on the sidelines, when we could be achieving, when we could be adding value. And that's a big problem. The problem is contained, right? When humility turns into meekness, if we're not acting, if it only impacts us. But what if we have knowledge and experience and resources that other people can benefit from? Now that humility that is morphed into meekness keeps us on the sidelines, and it keeps us from impacting other people in the way that we could. And that's why the true sweet spot is right in the middle of those two. And this quote, of course, doesn't suggest if Goethe would have agreed with that, but you have to think that he would. If this great error is, or these two great errors are being on the extremes over here, thinking too much of ourselves, but on the other hand, not thinking enough, right? Less than one is worth. If we think that we're worth less than we actually are, not a good thing. If we can find that sweet spot in the middle, right? Where we value ourselves and we value our contributions. We value what we can bring to a team, to the world, what we can achieve on our own. But we balance that with an understanding that we still have a lot to learn, that we need to work with a team, that we need to think about others and not just our own selves, right? That we should ask questions because other people will know more than we are. All of these things go into it. They form in the middle to create this balance of primility that we're looking for. That's the sweet spot. And that's where we become truly capable of achieving whatever we love and are capable of, right? That was one of the first taglines of Primility, is that by learning to balance your pride and your humility, you are able to achieve what you love, what you're passionate about, and also capable of, because obviously None of us have unlimited capabilities. We have some things we're better at, some things that are possible for us, and some things that aren't. But when we reach this sweet spot, we really enable ourselves to maximize our potential. And in a macro sense, that's really what Primility is. And on that micro sense, as we've been talking about a lot lately, it's about making that next best decision, right? So if we are committing this great error that Goethe talks about, right? Let's say that we're thinking too much of ourselves, right? We're thinking that we're more than we are. And that's keeping us from being where we want to be. Now our next decision needs to swing that pendulum back, right? And go on this other side of humility. And on the flip side, if we're committing the other side of this great error that Goethe talks about, right? And we are taking ourselves for less than we are worth, now our next action needs to be one of pride, where we stand up and where we reassert our belief in ourselves. So that is today's Wisdom Wednesday, is to, as much as we can, focus on not committing this great error, right? We end every episode talking about being cognizant of our pride and humility. We begin every episode of Primility Primer talking about how this is our morning reminder of the power of balancing pride and humility. And that is what this quote is talking about, is learning to bring these two ideas into balance, because believing that we're more than we're worth will get us into trouble. Believing that we're less than, that we are worth less than we actually are, will also get us into trouble. We don't want to be on the extremes. Those are the great errors. We want to be right in the middle, in the sweet spot. That is Primility. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Primility Primer, this episode of Wisdom Wednesday. We appreciate it. And I will remind you, of course, to go to primility.com/join, get on the email list. I know keeping up with the daily show is difficult, really impossible. You can't do it. But if you get on the email list, every Friday we send out a digest so that you can see that week's episodes. You can see the headlines, see descriptions. And if you miss any, then you can go back and figure out which ones that you want to catch up on. Again, that is primility.com/join. We will be back tomorrow morning at 6:30 Central sharp with another brand new episode of Primility Primer. We appreciate you being here. We hope you'll be here for the next one. In the meantime, stay cognizant of your pride and your humility. Don't commit the great error. Respond.